And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman on the road in Stanford, California. Civil rights attorney Lynne Stewart has been ordered to prison to begin serving a 2.5-year sentence after a federal appeals court upheld her conviction on Tuesday. Lynne Stewart was found guilty in 2005 of distributing press releases on behalf of her jailed client, Sheikh Omar Abdel-Rahman, also known as the Blind Sheikh, who's serving a life sentence on terror-related charges. Prosecutors had sought a 30-year sentence, but Stewart was sentenced to 2.5 years after the judge rejected the prosecutor's argument that she threatened national security and ruled there was no evidence her actions caused any harm. On Tuesday, a 3-judge appeals court panel ordered the trial judge to revoke Stewart's bond and said she must begin serving her 28-month sentence. The panel rejected Stewart's claim she was acting only as a zealous advocate for her imprisoned client when she passed messages for him. The appellate ruling said, quote, "A genuinely held intent to represent a client zealously is not necessarily inconsistent with criminal intent." The panel also described Stewart's 28-month sentence as, quote, "strikingly low," and sent the case back to the trial judge to determine whether she deserved a longer prison term. The ruling said Stewart, who's 70 years old, was to surrender to U.S. Marshals immediately, but her lawyers won her an extension until at least 5 p.m. today. Well, Lynne Stewart has come to our studios here in New York, and we welcome you, Lynne, to Democracy Now! Can you describe your reaction to the ruling?
Well, in its sweeping and negative tone, I must say I was first a little bit shocked because we had expected, or had hoped at least, that some of these important constitutional issues would be decided, and then very disappointed. On my own behalf, certainly, personally, you can't discount, but actually for all of us, Amy, because these important constitutional issues, the right to speak to your lawyer privately without the government listening in, the right to be safe from having a search conducted of your lawyer's office, all these things are now swept under the rug and available to the government.
Can you, for people who haven't followed your case, explain exactly what happened, why you were charged?
I represented Sheikh Omar at trial. That was in 1995, along with Ramsey Clark and Abdeen Jabara. I was lead trial counsel. He was convicted in September of 95, sentenced to a life prison plus 100 years, or one of the usual outlandish sentences. We continued, all three of us, to visit him while he was in jail. He was a political client. That means that he is targeted by the government, and because it is so important to prisoners to be able to have access to their lawyers. Sometime in 1998, I think maybe it was, they imposed severe restrictions on him. That is, his ability to communicate with the outside world, to have interviews, to be able to even call his family was limited by something called special administrative measures. The lawyers were asked to sign on for these special administrative measures and warned that if these measures were not adhered to, they could indeed lose contact with their client, in other words, be removed from his case. In 2000, I visited the Sheikh, and he asked me to make a press release. This press release had to do with the current status of an organization that at that point was basically defunct, the Jamaat Islamiyah, and I agreed to do that. In May of, maybe it was later than that, sometime in 2000, I made the press release. Interestingly enough, we found out later that the Clinton administration under Janet Reno had the option to prosecute me, and they declined to do so, based on the notion that without lawyers like me or the late Bill Kunstler or many that I could name, the cause of justice is not well served. They need the gadflies. So at any rate, they made me sign on to the agreement again not to do this. They did not stop me from representing him. I continued to represent him, and it was only after 9/11 in April of 2002 that John Ashcroft came to New York, announced the indictment of me, my paralegal, and the interpreter for the case on grounds of materially aiding a terrorist organization. One of the footnotes to the case, of course, is that Ashcroft also appeared on nationwide television with Letterman that night, ballyhooing the great work of Bush's Justice Department in indicting and making the world safe from terrorism. The course of the case followed. We tried the case in 2005 to a jury, of course, sitting not 10 blocks from the World Trade Center, and an anonymous jury, I might add, which I think went a long way to contribute to our convictions, and all three of us were convicted. Since that time, the appeals process has followed. The appeal was argued almost 2 years ago, and the opinion just came like actually like a thunderclap yesterday. And to just put it in perspective, I think, it comes hard on the heels of Holder's announcement that they are bringing the men from Guantanamo to New York to be tried. I'll expand on that if you wish, but that basically is where we're at. It said that I should be immediately remanded, my bail revoked.
Lynne, I wanted to read to you from the Times their description, saying, in addressing whether Stewart's sentence was too lenient, Judge Sack wrote that Judge Kodal had cited her extraordinary personal characteristics and had described her as a dedicated public servant who had throughout her career represented the poor, the disadvantaged, and the unpopular. But Judge Kodal had declined to determine whether Ms. Stewart had lied at trial, a factor he should have considered in weighing her sentence. Judge Sack wrote, "We think that whether Stewart lied under oath at her trial is directly relevant to whether her sentence was appropriate." What are they talking about? What is their accusation about you lying at trial?
Well, of course, I'm not rendering a legal opinion here, Amy, because I'm officially disbarred, but I will say that my understanding of the law is that the judge may consider whether or not a client or a person who testified in their own defense lied or even shaded the truth to their own benefit. And my sense of reading, and I haven't read them over recently, but my sense of the sentencing was that the judge did consider it, at least in a manner. He basically said he did not think it was relevant, and the Court of Appeals argued with this. I, of course, committed no perjury. I spoke on my own behalf. I described what I did. I'm not sure that the Court of Appeals may have liked what I said, but that is, because the U.S. Attorney went into my politics at great length, as if to say, see, she has radical politics, so we know she would have done something radical. I've always said my politics are very, very different from the Sheikh's politics, and that was an unfair cut. But notwithstanding that, they do have the right to consider it. It can be something, if the judge believed you lied, that can increase your sentence. I have every reason to believe that Judge Kodal, who is a most careful judge, a judge described in the opinion by Judge Calabrese as being someone who makes very wise decisions, considered it, rejected it, and went ahead. This was the sentence he arrived at, 28 months, and we hope that he will retain the courage that he had in making that sentence to stick with it now that the government, through the Second Circuit, has challenged it.
Lynne Stewart, as you were being sentenced in 2006, you had breast cancer. How are you today? How's your health?
Breast cancer is good. I have no recurrence. I just had a mammogram, even though I'm 70. I don't know how that falls into the new warnings, but at any rate, I'm cancer-free. I have some other aging problems, woman plumbing stuff, which I actually am scheduled for surgery on December 7th. My lawyers are hoping to be able to go to the Second Circuit and ask them to extend the period of time that I would have to surrender in order that this surgery may be accomplished right here in New York at Lenox Hill Hospital. We're not sure of that. It does seem that
Can you explain how this happens today? Because at this point, you have an extension until 5 p.m. today.